The food shortage is about to get much worse as farms are failing, and that also means higher prices. I'm your host, Steven Van Metre, and thanks for joining me today as another casualty of the pandemic rears its ugly head as farmers are facing failure. Farms are failing as fertilizer prices drive up costs of food, according to the Wall Street Journal, as farmers in the developing world say they are curtailing production, which means global hunger could worsen. From South America's avocado, corn, and coffee farms to Southeast Asia's plantations of coconuts and palm oils, high fertilizer prices are weighing in on farmers across the developing world, making it much costlier to cultivate and forcing many to cut back on production. That means grocery bills could go up even more in 2022, following a year in which global food prices already rose to decade highs. An uptick would exacerbate hunger, already acute in some parts of the world because of pandemic-linked job losses, and thwart efforts by politicians and central bankers to subdue inflation. Farms are failing and many people are not growing. Since 61-year-old Rodrigo Fierro, who produces avocados, tangerines, and oranges on his 10-acre farm in central Colombia, he has seen fertilizer prices double in recent months, he said. But that's not just it. Cristiana Ribeiro de Veio, who comes from a long line of coffee growers in Brazil, is this year paying 3 times what she paid last year for fertilizer she needs. Coupled with the recent drought that hit her crop hard, it means Mrs. de Veio, 75, will produce a fraction of her Ribeiro de Valle brand of coffee, some of which is exported. There are also a shortage of fertilizer. Keyword, there's a shortage of fertilizer. This year you pay to put your name on a waiting list, and the supplier delivers it when he has it, she said. And farmers in the U.S. are also feeling the pinch, with some shifting their planting plans, that the impact is expected to be worse in developing countries where smallholders have limited access to bank loans and can't pay for upfront expensive fertilizer. And this situation is only going to get worse because this is a lagging effect. You don't put seeds in the ground and get crops immediately. This means food prices are likely to stay higher for much longer, despite central bankers' attempts to contain inflation. But while you might be worried about food, one thing you shouldn't be worried about, that's your portfolio. Be sure to check out Portfolio Shield. You'll be glad you did. Let's keep going with the story, because lower fertilizer use would inevitably weigh on food production and quality, affecting food availability, rural incomes, and the livelihoods of the poor, says Joseph, a deputy director of the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization's Trade and Markets Division. As the pandemic enters year 3, more households are having to cut down on the quantity and quality of food they consume, the World Bank said in a note last month, noting that high fertilizer prices were adding to costs. The price increases stem partly from global energy costs, with the average natural gas price in Europe for the October-December quarter 10 times as much as that for the year 2020, according to World Bank data. Nitrogen production facilities rely heavily on natural gas to convert chemical raw materials into finished products, so rises in natural gas price often flow through into fertilizer costs. And here you can see the Henry Hub natural gas spot price of gas is not at its all-time highs. You might think, with all the stories about food shortages and farmers, that we would see this thing off the chart. But this just small increase here is having a devastating effect on farmers due to the pandemic. And of course, Bloomberg now headlines, fertilizer price drop may signal relief at last for U.S. farmers. As you just saw, prices look like they're heading down. Wholesale U.S. prices for fertilizer are dropping, and that could signal easing food cost pressures and relief for farmers getting set for spring planting. But do keep in mind, just because they're looking at planting for spring doesn't mean those crops are coming right out of the ground. This thing is going to go on much longer than it needs to, and that's going to pinch many households who are in desperate need of extra cash flow. And here you can see that split urea, the retail price for nitrogen fertilizer, continue to climb, but the wholesale prices are falling, giving some hope that prices will come down. And fertilizer prices soared to repeated records over the last few months, spurred by setbacks including an energy crunch in Europe, unexpected plant closures, and halted exports from major suppliers. The increases have stoked concerns over prospects for further food inflation at a time when consumers are already paying more for staples like grains and coffee. Still, urea remains significant on-farm expense despite the drop in January, according to Maxwell, who said prices are still almost double the level they were at this time last year. And it starts to become obvious why periods of high inflation lead to recession, because it digs into discretionary spending and people have to choose between eating and out spending on fun things. And that's not good for the economy, and this is not good for people all over the world. I'm your host, Steven Van Metre. Thanks for watching. Bye now. The content of this video is private educational information only. Is not intended to provide investment advice. This video will have to be construed as recommendation or solicitation by selling security, financial instrument, or participate in any particular trade strategy. This video was prepared by Steven Van Metre, personal capacity. Opinions expressed in this video that do not affect the view of Atlas Financial Advising or Steven Van Metre Financial.